Hey, hello there. It's Clark, me. It's Clark, and this is the T.O.C. show. And in about a minute and a half, we're going to click straight into the show where Graham Scott and I have a chat with Wolf McNally about the Flying Logic software. But before we get there, I just wanted to show you a little demo of Flying Logic. This is from the Flying Logic website. If you've never seen it before, it's freaking amazing. It's a TOC thinking tool at its base. It was built for the TOC community to use. People all around the world pay to buy it and use it to solve big, gnarly problems. And it really is clever. And you can see it playing in the background here. Very snazzy, I do think. And I'm just going to go quiet for a few moments, and then we're going to pop into the talk proper. I think if you're an experienced Flying Logic user, you will find it very, very interesting. Wolf's got some wonderful tips there. We talk about all sorts of really interesting sort of thinking things, but really it's just having a look at the tool and how clever it is, and how one guy has built this up and it's created something that helps the whole TOC community. So let's get into the show. Hello and welcome to the TOC show. Today we have Wolf McNally, who's going to talk about and show us a bit about Flying Logic, the TOC kind of heavy thinking, heavy lifting software that's used by TOC people all around the world for drawing our lovely, powerful, amazing diagrams. I'm not sure where he is on the screen. Below me is Graham Scott, who is,
Morning.
as you saw a few weeks ago, uses Flying Logic a lot, and he gave us a demo of that, and as well as the Druid thinking processes stuff a few weeks ago. And then you've got me. So I'm the host. I don't actually use Flying Logic, but I know so many people who do, and I may explain later why I don't use it. But I think I'm kind of an edge case, and I have a confession to make around it, which is kind of, it probably reflects more on me than anything else. So today it's Flying Logic thinking. Wolf, you've got a podcast on thinking and how and why it's so important and probably underused. And we may even talk a wee bit about your business, really, because you're kind of like, I think, a lot of people around the world. You're a small business, you've got a product, and when we were chatting the other day, you have one of those unenviable things that I just totally relate to, which is that you also have to promote the damn thing. You have
Exactly.
You've built your you've built your what's it, mousetrap, but
Yep.
now you have to go and tell everyone about it. So
Yep.
How about if we just get started? We've got a bunch of people there on the screen watching, and a bunch of people on YouTube. And I read somewhere the other day that I'm supposed to say, if you're watching us on YouTube, there's a little red button somewhere that you click and you subscribe to it. So you'll kind of see this stuff again more easily. There's a whole
Like, share, and subscribe.
Yes, yeah, all that stuff. Yeah, it's the promotion thing doesn't necessarily come naturally. So Wolf, everyone's watching this has seen Graham a few times. Can we start with the obvious one? Is your name Wolf?
My name is legally Wolf. It's not the name I was born with, though. My parents gave me a rather quotidian name, not a name I didn't mind at all most of my life. And as the internet started to take off in the 90s, I started, people use online handles, and I was picking various handles. And for a long time, I picked two words that were kind of meaningful to me, because I've gotten computers when I was 11 years old and started lifting weights when I was 14. So iron has always been an important part of my life. And wolf, I've always kind of admired the spirit or symbology of wolves. So I chose Iron Wolf and used that as like an online name for a long time. And then eventually I just kind of dropped the iron and just started using Wolf online in various contexts, and then started using it in, like, I attended the Burning Man Art Festival in United States in Nevada a number of times. And people often pick what they call their playa names. to use at Burning Man, and I just chose Wolf. It was easy, and at one point I introduced myself to somebody and said, "Hi, I'm Wolf," and the guy looked at me very intensely and said, "Of course you are." And I kind of was like, "Oh, okay, interesting." And slowly after that point, the name just kind of took over my life until I finally, about 4 years ago, decided to make it official. You can still find, I don't make a big deal about my previous name. It's very interesting to change your name though, because it's I think in some ways I've changed so much over the last 10 years. I'm almost like a new person. So that's kind of one of the ways I celebrated that. And I'm sure we'll touch on that again as I tell my story about Flying Logic and so on. So, I'm definitely Wolf. I don't even relate very much to my old name anymore, but it's if you ever thought about changing your name, I suggest give it some serious thought, because it's been a very good thing for me.
Right. Well, Clark is a brand of shoes over here, and in the UK. I'm not sure how international that is, so I'll stick with that for the moment. Anyway, I love that story though, and having listened to your podcast. And having chatted with you, well, you are your name. It's just it's fantastic. Right. So that stuff aside, where are you in the world?
I'm in Boulder City, Nevada, which is actually about 30 minutes away from the Las Vegas Strip. Mm-hmm. I remarried several years ago. My wife and I decided to move out of California to kind of save some money and but still be in striking distance of my family who are still in Los Angeles. And it's just really nice small town atmosphere here, and we really love it.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Right. So let's get to the meat in the sandwich, which is Flying Logic. Now, I wonder if, how about you just tell us about Flying Logic? But what I'm particularly interested in,
sure,
which is different to what Graham and others will be, is I want to know, how did it start? How did it start?
Yeah, well, so back in the early 2000, 2001, 2002, I was working, I was VP of engineering for a small startup. It was actually in the gaming space, doing online multiplayer games, massively multiplayer online games. And but the CEO of the company at that time was a big fan of the Theory of Constraints, and he showed me the book by Lisa Scheinkopf. I have it here, Thinking for a Change, putting the ToC thinking processes to use. Yeah, there we go. Well, hey, mine is autographed, so
okay.
So it wasn't autographed when I first got it, but no, but I made contact with Lisa after I'd written Flying Logic and basically showed it to her, because I was looking around for ToC experts who might be interested in helping me promote it and so on. And so Lisa and I started a conversation, and it was very fruitful. In fact, I credit Lisa with helping me name the product, because I sent her like my short list and various names. I don't even remember what the other possibilities were, but Flying Logic was on that list, and she said she liked that one. So I said, okay, very good, Flying Logic it is. So, until that point, and I'll flash back a little bit here, but the tool had been called Decision Builder, which was a much drier name, but very descriptive. So how it started was I read Lisa's book and was very inspired by it, and because I'm a very visual thinker, I thought, wow, this is critical thinking made visual, basically, and this is awesome. And I read the goal. And I thought somebody ought to write some software to support this, and then kind of put it aside, because I didn't have the financial motivation or impetus to do it myself. I thought somebody should do that. And then a few years later, I did several years of consulting work for a company called Applied Minds in Glendale, California. This was started by Danny Hillis, one of the pioneers of parallel computing, and Brand Farron, who was one of the, I guess he was head of Walt Disney Imagineering. And of course, Glendale, California is also home to Walt Disney Imagineering. So they basically had started Applied Minds as kind of like Imagineering for hire. And their clients were large companies like General Motors and Steelcase, the furniture manufacturer, and Northrop Grumman. And so and walking through Danny Hillis's labs was like, basically for an engineer like me, was like stepping into Wonka's factory. So he had a full model shop over here, machine shop over here, Alan Kay sitting over there working on Squeak and stuff like that in that corner. It's like, wow, okay, so he knew how to basically create a sense of wonder around this and make you want to work for them. So I had helped launch a product called Pixel Blocks, which is a toy. You can Google it. So invented by a friend of mine, patented by him. I helped launch the company. somebody had taken some of the pixel blocks I'd given out as samples to Danny Hillis, and he called me and said, basically, anybody who can help launch a product like this is somebody I'd like to work with. So I did several projects for them, and the projects, in general, one of his clients like Northrop Grumman would come to him and say, we need fresh ideas for like military course of action analysis. And so they hire creative technologists like me to kind of brainstorm and come up with ideas, and then kind of bring those ideas down from the sky into, proofs of concept. And so from high concept to proof of concept. And so that's what they tasked me with. And I basically said, I don't know really anything about military course of action analysis, but I looked into it and realized, oh, wow, this problem solving looks a lot like this other thing I read, the theory of constraints thinking processes. And so I said, could I have, the budget to actually create some tools to do this? And they said, sure. So for the next year or so, I wrote a piece of software, and they didn't care at the time what platform I wrote it on, because they just wanted to demo it. They just wanted to demo it because their clients would take these ideas and then, move them in whatever directions they felt they needed to. So I'm a Mac guy. I'm always been kind of an Apple snob. So I wrote it on the Mac because they didn't care. And I knew it well. So I did it. And then I started demoing it because we had a lot of demos. And I would demo it both at Northrop Grumman as well as Applied Minds. People would come in from various companies in Northrop Grumman specifically. And the demos all went very well. And then something kind of remarkable happened, which is that a number of Northrop Grumman employees began requisitioning Macs so they could run my software. Now, as you probably realize, it's not a Mac shop, it's a Windows shop. And so they kind of came to me, a bit confused and said, can you rewrite this for Windows? And I said, well, I don't really do Windows, but I can do Java, and Java runs on Mac and Windows. So, and they said, great. So they threw more money at me, and I hired another engineer to work with. And we basically began Decision Builder 2.0. So once that was far enough along, a lot more demos. They actually sent me on a tour around the country. I actually got demoed at the Pentagon and things like that. So, and then, they basically said, yeah, this is one of our graduates from the Northrop Grumman Futures Lab. And I was very honored by that. But I also realized that they weren't going to do anything with it publicly. This was not going to see the light of day. They're not a software publisher. No. And so I approached them and said, I really think this ought to be out in the world. Can we do a deal so that I can publish, maintain, and improve this forever, basically? And, it's sometimes surprising how easy it can be dealing with a big company when they're motivated. And they said yes. And so we worked out a deal. And ever since then, I've been Flying Logic's, producer, publisher, and promoter. It's my business. We're all very happy with the arrangement. And so I created it, I launched it, went to one of the ToC conferences at that time, the ToC ICO, kind of announced it at the ToC ICO. And then what I would call a self-limiting belief kicked in, which was that, well, I'm a maker of things. I'm not really a marketer. I'm not really a salesperson. And besides, what I built was so great, everybody would want it and everybody would just come and buy it. So it was kind of field of dreams thing. I built it, they will come. So I just sat back and waited for people to buy the product. And I had a good website at the time, for its day, and did press releases and stuff like that, but kind of dropped the ball when it came to actually marketing it, and went on with other projects and so on. And just, it was selling. We actually, my business partner, Joe Pierce, and I, basically, we continue to maintain and improve it steadily over time. Yep. But really, I failed to understand that, that as a maker, I also needed to be the person out in front, kind of promoting and marketing and really kind of doing that. So, so I dropped the ball, went over other things, and it kind of languished. It basically, it was still there, still selling by itself, but without any real advertising or updated website or any kind of outreach or anything like that going on. So a couple of years ago, after I moved to Nevada, I was talking with my wife, Luna, and we were, she has a marketing degree from Georgia Tech, and we were talking about projects we might work on. There were a number of ideas, on the front burner, but creating new business website-based businesses and so on. And then I kind of realized, well, there's this Flying Logic thing I've had, for so many years, and I really started kind of looking into my user database and kind of what people were saying about it and so on. I did some analysis, and I also did a user survey and realized a number of things. In fact, that the user base for Flying Logic was extremely passionate. that there was nothing else like it still. It was kind of in a class of its own. And that it was actually in use by over 5% of the Fortune 500 companies had at least one license, and some of them, dozens of licenses.
Sorry, say that again.
To my product. Over 5% of the Fortune 500 companies had at least one license to my product, but it's many of them 20, 30, 50 licenses. And then many individual small consultants around the world. The audience was particularly international. And I realized this was my acres of diamonds. And if you don't know that story, I know I told it to you before, Clark, I'll tell it again briefly now. This was a story told by Earl Nightingale, a very famous success author and speaker, that I heard when I was growing up. And it tells the story of an apocryphal story of a farmer in South Africa who was hearing stories about people getting rich finding diamonds and starting diamond mines. And so he sold his family farm to go look for diamonds in the hills. And he died destitute, basically, because he failed. Meanwhile, back on his farm, the man he'd sold the farm to was walking through a stream one day on the farm, looked down, saw a glint of light, picked it up, curious about it. He wasn't really, he didn't recognize what he'd found. He put it on the mantelpiece of the house. And when a visitor came, he said, "Do you know what you have there?" And he said, "No." He said, "That's a huge uncut diamond." It turns out that the whole farm was literally acres of diamonds. So unlike the farmer, I had not sold my farm. I was just kind of letting it lie fallow. And so I've realized that, this is what I need to do. I need to come back to my acres of diamonds and really, realize its potential. And so that's become my mission. And so revitalizing Flame Logic is what I've been engaged in. We've redone the website. We've implemented modern, online marketing techniques. I'm starting to, produce, I think, very high quality YouTube videos. Obviously, I'm putting myself out there and really kind of, promoting it, and because I want the whole world to know about it. That's the only reason why 100% of the Fortune 500 companies aren't using it. They don't know about it, and that's on me. So
totally get that. I think this is a recurring thing with a lot of people, especially small businesses. That's my whole kind of dilemma. I want to make stuff, but I need to promote it, and I actually quite enjoy promoting it, provided I can do that in a way that I feel comfortable with, and provided I sometimes outsource the stuff I'm not good at. I married a doctor, not a marketing person, so maybe it was a bad choice. But I totally get that. You're going to say something?
I think you married a psychiatrist, Clark, and I think that was a very good choice. The more I've got to know you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and actually, she's an old age psychiatrist, so it gets better and better and better every more appropriate every year. Yeah, but that's really something that we. I think so many of us struggle with, is that we're good at some stuff, the making and the doing, but it's the other stuff that other people are good at. So you married well, but even if you hadn't, you would still have had to go and find those skills from somewhere else.
Yes. Yeah. I lucked into that, and because obviously that's not why we got married, but
No.
But yeah, it's just been so synergistic on so many levels.
Yeah. Well, your website looks actually really stunning. I think I look at it, and I can remember before the before version, and it looked like it looked like what it was. Now it looks like what it is.
It looked like a 20-year-old website. I mean, what it is now. My wife, in addition to her marketing degree, she's done hundreds of websites for all kinds of, especially a lot of lawyers, and everything from lawyers to nunneries. She's done websites for, and she's, her company Robot Media has done, a lot of different websites for people, and she's my partner now, so we on every level.
And she clearly knows what she's doing. So it looks good. So if we think about, my selfishness is also very altruistic, which I think a lot of us are. I want more people to know about T.O.C. And I think what I love about your tool is that it helps people do T.O.C. But more than that, it actually makes T.O.C., the thinking processes, look like a credible thing, because someone bothered to make a nice, snazzy, high-performing tool. So it adds credibility to the thinking processes. So that's why I particularly like it. But as I said, I'm unusual. And I was wondering if I could switch to Graham, because he might better tell us why he likes it, and then maybe you two could bounce off it. And what I'm going to do is take myself off spotlight, and And if you're comfortable with that, Graham, how about we get you to sell everyone why Flying Logic is wonderful from your point of view?
Oh, absolutely. I've been using the ToC thinking. I teach it. Spend a lot of time with post-it notes on bits of paper, which is, I think, good when you're learning. My first, I suppose, the biggest thing that I did is I did a master's a few years ago looking at budgeting, and I didn't know about Flying Logic at that stage, so I did it all my current reality tree on an Excel spreadsheet, and it was a nightmare. Every time I found something new and I wanted to put it in there, I had to shift squares around, and the arrows were all straight, so they wouldn't go around anything. And halfway through the masters, I discovered Flying Logic, and it was just fantastic. I could add stuff in there. It rearranged itself. I've got dozens of files, just complete collections of clouds, conflicts that I found as I did it. So, yeah, it's a fantastic product, Wolf. I'm
just curious, from your own point of view, Graham,
Ian,
what would you say? What would you say is the thing that makes Flying Logic different from other products? I know how I'd answer that, but as a user, I'd love to know what you think.
I think because it's purpose designed, it's not a general product. So everything I need is in there, and I think the way it organizes itself, it's built for users of the ToC thinking tools. You're not trying to take something. I mean, I love Excel. It's a wonderful product, but it's a very general sort of thing. It's not specifically designed for this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'd say part of what I have to explain to people is, what makes Flying Logic different from other diagramming tools like Visio, for instance, because people see boxes and lines, they think, oh, it's a drawing tool. And one of the first things I have to explain is, no, Flying Logic isn't a drawing tool; it's a modeling tool. It's not for designers. It's not for it's not for people who want to create snazzy presentations. Its output looks pretty good, and that's part of my goal, because I'm a creative technologist. I'm a designer as well as an engineer. So to make things look good is important, but also to keep people's thinking in the forefront of the process is the most important thing with Flying Logic. And so Flying Logic kind of stands one idea on its head, and this is both, I think, Flying Logic's greatest strength as well as one of the impediments people have coming to it. Is that why can't I rearrange things in any way I want in Flying Logic? Because it does things its own way. It controls the layout. And the answer is that, well, if you controlled the layout, that would be a huge cognitive burden on you. It's better if you learn to let Flying Logic do that. And that is what what differentiates Flying Logic first and foremost from anything else. Is it handles the layout, you handle the thinking, because it doesn't think for you, but it does the layout really well. And then, we can talk about, ways that people, still criticize the layout in Flying Logic and ways that I intend to improve it. But, that's the basic philosophy of Flying Logic. And the other, I would say, core idea of Flying Logic is to do modeling through directed acyclic graphs, or DAGs. So the idea that, a cause can have many effects, an effect can have many causes. And things like mind mapping tools, which do trees but not DAGs and so on, are that is another key thing that makes Flying Logic different, is that basically enforces that idea that you can't just connect anything to anything without consequence. Things flow through Flying Logic. So those are a couple, kind of keystone concepts that went into Flying Logic.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I see Ian's written that the auto layout is the number one thing for him. I see he's also got a couple of questions about how far away is the cloud and collaborative version, which was,
I can address that briefly now, which is that I'm actually writing code on it, day by day. It's going to be a while, because my plan currently is, as my story, my backstory now, It's only been the past couple of years that I really kind of revitalized my own marketing FlyLogic. FlyLogic itself is a very mature, stable tool. It's a desktop app, Mac, Windows, and even Linux. But because it was written in Java, it's not an easy translation to the web, to iPads, to things like that. So it will need a complete rewrite. And I'm actually doing that day by day. But my primary goal as a business right now is to make sure the whole world knows about what's there, which is extremely useful. And people are getting a lot done with it right now. So I need to really maximize that market potential that will help me create the income I need to actually do this next version, because I have a lot of ideas about where it's going. And while it's this isn't the right time or place for me to discuss my full vision, I have definitely heard the things that people want improved about FlyLogic, and I have very strong ideas about how I want to do that. So I'm looking to my own efforts in marketing and getting the word out about this to propel the next stage of development of FlyLogic, which I hope will address almost every single issue or concern people have. Of course, you can't satisfy everybody all the time, but I definitely want to make things better across the board, including online, collaborative. I also want to keep the security in place, because one of the things I've discovered with FlyLogic and my customers, because they do a lot of very sensitive planning, coordinating, and so on using FlyLogic, they don't want it phoning home. I get regularly asked, does FlyLogic, store any of its information on the internet? It's like, no, it only checks for if there's a new version number, and you can even turn that off in the preferences. So, so I want to basically make this new code base be available in all these different ways, depending on the needs of my customers. The other thing I'm going to be doing very soon is introducing a SaaS model, because right now it's been perpetual licensing. You buy like version 2 or version 3, and it's good forever. But I find that when I introduced FlyLogic, there was no real SaaS model that was popular, so I really couldn't do that at that time. Well, now it's become kind of mainstream to do that. So, so FlyLogic 4 will introduce a SaaS model, a subscription model that will both hopefully lower the price barrier to entry for new users and let them kind of get their feet wet, as well as sustain more development over time and make it so that everybody has all the most recent version all the time, just naturally.
Okay, so it almost sounds from what you've said that you've got a planned rollout and a direction that you're taking the business. I'm assuming you use your own software to do that modeling
all the time. I still discover new uses for it. I mean, since obviously I'm an engineer, I use it to do dependency diagrams between software modules. I've used it to do network architecture for like Amazon Web Services and so on, front end, back end kind of stuff. If you go to flylogic.com and just click on the very first video link there, it's a little 2-minute spot I did called "What Can You Do with FlyLogic?" Yes, FlyLogic was inspired by ToC originally, and it definitely supports ToC out of the box. My ebook, Thinking with FlyLogic, basically describes the fundamentals of the ToC and how you use the ToC thinking processes with FlyLogic. But it's a fairly general horizontal tool. You can use it for all kinds of mind-related processes that aren't necessarily ToC/TP.
Okay, and that's. I understand exactly what you're meaning. Once you get used to it, you can use it for all sorts of planning things and things like that. My reservation, you're not going to try and broaden it too much. It's still going to be very much ToC focused.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, ToC is the thinking processes as far as I'm concerned. The fact that we can do, org charts or network architecture is nice, but as far as I'm concerned, FlyLogic's roots are in ToC. It is the way I think people need to learn to think. So I'm never going to shortchange that. I'm sure that everybody here would agree with me that if everybody understood the ToC and the basic ideas that Elihu Goldratt put forth, and how to think visually, everything from conflict resolution with clouds to for future incrementality trees, if people learned the basic principles of these, the world would be a much better place.
Yes, I think you're definitely preaching to the converted there.
I'm going to butt in there because can we talk about? So I think that's a really important thing. Your audience is people who are already converted to ToC and want something that makes it easier to actually put it into action. Would that be right? So if you've got kind of like a picture of a funnel, the most viable ones for you are already aware of TOC, but their problem is the thinking.
Yeah, when I did my user survey, I asked people, what do you do with Flying Logic? And the vast majority of the answers were TOC related things, current reality trees, future reality trees, things like that. But I got a surprising number of answers that weren't that at all as well. So, because, like I said, I've created a fairly general tool. People, once they may come in through the TOC door, but then they realize it's actually useful for a lot of things. Yeah. So, it gets used for a surprisingly wide variety of techniques, apart from TOC-TP.
I saw on the, so I'm very much Mac iPad oriented as well. And there's a Mac Power Users podcast, and they have a like an online forum thing where you can come in and talk about computer nerdy things. And I saw someone the other day actually recommend it as a tool for people who were diagramming. And he did mention TOC in there, but he was recommending it for everyone. It wasn't just the TOC. But my personal preference would be that you don't dilute it. And I don't think you're going to do that. Yeah.
No, I will always have TOC kind of front and center in terms of the purposes. That's why I originally created software, was to facilitate the TOC-TP, and that's never going to change, because that is first and foremost support for the thinking processes. But apart from that, I have people make requests all the time that you'd have no real reason to do that for thinking processes, but a wide variety of people would find it useful. So my goal is to increase the depth of the product while still making the core of the product, very front and center, but have more and more functionality discoverable as you get deeper into it.
Yep. Okay. That sounds really cool. Graham, do you have any more questions right now? Or are you?
Not particularly. I think my one upgrade that I would request would be some sort of spell check in the typing. I was demonstrating a couple of weeks ago on this show, and was highly embarrassed at my typing skills, which normally autocorrect, but they didn't. But that's a minor thing. I can live with that.
Some of the limitations that Flying Logic faces is due to the fact that it is based on Java, and some of the tools we have in Java are freebies. They almost come without effort, and others we have to put a huge amount of effort to make sure that it does what it needs to do. So I agree. It should have spell check and things like that. And some of these things, like I say, are easy to do. Some aren't. I don't generally give exact time frames and so on. We will be coming out with Flying Logic 3.1 soon. That's currently in testing. And it's got some requested improvements to it. And again, so a lot of these things are going to be incremental. The big thing in 4.0, there will be other features. Will be the SaaS model, and we'll provide an easy transition path to that. And of course, we're also, right now working with various companies to try to do enterprise licensing as well. So we want to basically make it an unrefusable offer for companies who really want to adopt Flying Logic widely within their organization. So contact me about that. So, yeah.
What I really like about it, and I think Graham demonstrated this a few weeks ago when he went through and built a current reality tree using James Powell's Druid process. So some of that, like the TV chef, he pulled some out of the oven that had been prepared earlier, which was good because, limited time and honestly, watching people think, it's sometimes much easier to watch the end results of people thinking. But you could see there the power of just typing once you got the process in and just go this and this and this, and all you had to do was just think about the thinking, and then occasionally take that big picture, look at it and go, oh, okay, yeah, now things have moved around with the auto layout a bit, and I know there's a little bit there where it gets a bit discombobulating, if that's actually a word. If not, it should be a word. I'm pretty sure it's a word.
It is. I believe it is actually.
So could you talk about the auto layout thing? Because I know and when Graham was doing that was one of the things that people were discussing.
Sure.
Yeah. Tell me about that.
That's one of the chief concerns and criticisms of doing things the kind of the Flying Logic way is the auto layout, because it's controlling the layout. It can actually move anything anywhere every time you adjust the diagram. Anything could move anywhere, and sometimes it does. Now, I've taken steps to mitigate this, and they're partially successful in some ways. They're very, they make the product more useful in other ways. But for instance, when you connect two things that are very close to each other, they'll generally stay very close to each other, but other things may move around a lot because the layout algorithm is trying to minimize line crossings and kind of create a parsimonious design. The FlyLogic has a feature, it's been there for a long time, it's in the toolbar, called Incremental Layout. When you turn it on, it will try to make the absolute minimum number of physical changes to the diagram to make the change you're asking for. And so this is one of the kind of and I on the FlyLogic YouTube channel, youtube.com/FlyLogic, I do have an introduction to FlyLogic video where I actually show briefly how that works. But it's one of the features I suggest people discover pretty fast. It has to be used judiciously, because it's like basically when you turn it on, you're kind of freezing the diagram in place. And that basically means that it will start sacrificing things like creating a lot more line crossings. It'll even make arrows go backwards against the directed acyclic graph flow. And it may look a little bit weird after a while because it's trying to hold everything in place, whereas you're making changes. So it kind of builds up, I guess what we call layout tension in the diagram. And at some point you turn incremental layout off, it does a full layout, everything becomes parsimonious again, but a lot of stuff moves around. So you have to figure out what your own pacing is for this. So if you have a complex diagram, you want to make a few quick changes, especially if you're like demoing to other people and you want to make a couple quick experimental changes, turn on incremental layout, make those changes, as part of your demo. But if you're working on a larger diagram, turn it on when you're working in an area of the diagram where you don't want things to change much, and then turn it off when you have kind of the mental space to, let it rearrange. And of course, FlyLogic does things like when you create a new edge that connects two of the boxes, it will highlight that edge. So the new edge is highlighted even through the animated transition. So no matter how things move around, that new edge you added is still highlighted. So or when you create a new entity, no matter how it realistic, that new entity is still highlighted. So just learning little habits like the thing I just made is highlighted always. Is just a good way of keeping track of how things are. And after a while, it takes a little practice, because again, FlyLogic way of doing things is not, it's not a designer's tool. A designer tool lets you put anything anywhere. FlyLogic takes that from you, and what it gives you once you get practice using it is the freedom to focus on your thinking, just as you were saying, Clark.
Okay, so can we just bounce off a different tool? It just reminded me of it earlier when you were talking about how your colleagues way back when started buying Macs so they could use your software. I bought a Mac so I could use writing software called Scrivener.
I know that software, yeah.
I tried a Windows beta and I thought, I have to have this, but I'm not going to risk all my words in a beta. So I bought Mac and I switched to it. And one of the most useful pieces of advice that I got, I read years later when I was reading a book about writing with Scrivener in particular, and what the guy said, he said, look, Scrivener can do all these many amazing things. It's incredibly powerful, but you want to find the 5% of it that gets you going. That gets you productive and works with the way your mind works, and that'll be different for other people. And I think it might be what you were describing there is that you need to figure out how you use flying logic so that it fits with the way your mind works. And I noticed Ian loves the auto layout, and I think I totally get that. But it sounds like that incremental version might work a lot better for other people, but it's figuring out that stuff. And one of the difficult bits is when you look at something, it's like being given the instruction manual, the owner's manual for a car, and then trying to figure out how to drive it. It's different to actually sitting there with an instructor. And actually going through and the instructive course when you're learning how to drive a car doesn't take you straight out onto the busy roads. They start small. And so there's a way of learning how to use something like this that's beyond just where to click.
Sure. And well, of course you learn, the basics in a few minutes. How you connect things. There's a whole visual kind of gestural language in FlyLogic, is how you connect things together so that you can actually, build diagrams very quickly almost just by thinking about them, but you need to know what the gestures are. What does it mean when you drag from an entity, a box, to an edge, as opposed to from a box to a box?
Yep.
What are the four elements of Flying Logic? Entities, edges, junctures, and groups. How do you use them together? How do you scale a Flying Logic document? Once you start, creating a document that's larger and needs more management, how do you group things so that you're being efficient? How do you, there's a feature called hoisting, which can basically take anything in a group and make it your whole screen. So you can work within a group, as much as you want, and then unhoist it so it goes back out as part of the larger diagram. And there's a lot of things like that there to be discovered that you need to actually kind of understand. It's basically kind of give it the chance to, to say, okay, yes, Flying Logic, that's your job. And then once you get past that point, once you're thinking along those lines and you're focused on your thinking process as a planner, then you can start discovering these other features, including like incremental layout and so on, which can just make your life a lot easier. There's a lot more I want to add. And in fact, long term, my goal is to make everything incremental layout all the time. That's probably not going to happen until the next code base, but that will actually, address a lot of issues people have with the current kind of layout engine. So, like I say, I have a vision that, I'm very eager to implement, and but I need my market to help me support me through that. So that's why I really want to get the word out, because, it's really useful as it is now. I know you are. I really appreciate it. Yeah.
It's good for everyone. Okay, so I just got there's a bunch of questions there coming up, and maybe we do them, but I'm actually just a question. This might be a silly question, but would you mind with this video if I put on your homepage? I might see if I can put a little to take your video demonstration that you have, and see if I can somehow insert it in this video so people can just see what it looks like.
I would love that. Yeah, I mean, please, feel free to insert it in this video or alongside this video, whatever you like, and
I'll try and find the most elegant way of doing it. But
I can put the files in Dropbox for you. I have a Polish version as well, because I actually have quite a few people in Poland who use the software, and they requested a Polish version. I said, hey, if you translate the subtitles, or the titles of the video, I will do a version. So if you look on youtube.com/Flying Logic, there's actually a Polish version of the what can you do with Flying Logic that was made with the help of my Polish customers.
So I'll put a little bit at the front of this that just kind of gets people so they can go and get a bit of a sense of what it looks like. This session, I think, is really just to get the conversation flowing with people, and maybe to answer some of the questions here. So if I just scroll up, now I'm not sure what's been answered. Anne asked, does the software support linking files, e.g. visualizations, to individual entities? And Jack wrote back, not as far as I know, it's really focusing on helping people think and draw that out. Now, I'm not quite sure what Anne's question is. Anne, are you able to either come on and show your beautiful face? Or I think, or even your voice will do.
Yeah, my your screens froze, so I turned my video off as well. So my question is, with those entities, sometimes there's like supporting documentation. Is it possible to link this directly into the diagrams, to either pull up or include charts or graphs, documents?
There is all the elements of a Flying Logic document, including groups, entities, junctures, and edges, can be annotated. You can click on there's the sidebar inspectors where you can enter freeform text, style text, and even links. And if you enter like an HTTP link or whatever, then you lock that field, then it becomes clickable and you can link to it. Now, does Flying Logic include the ability to like put large form diagrams or images directly in the document? Not at this time. That is, I would say kind of a not common request, but it's not unheard of either. And so I definitely, would like to improve that in the future. But the idea of including more dynamic content from more sources, I mean, ultimately, again, long-term roadmap, I want to be able to create, like one of the big deals right now in online software is integrations. How do you integrate with other people's online software? You run API, so I want to do all that. The answer is yes, I want that too. It's going to take a while to get there, but it's definitely on the roadmap.
Just having clickable links in there, it's just so handy if you can click on that and it will go and open a Word document or a PDF or something.
You can do that, especially if the link is online. I think you can link to local files as well. It's been a while since I looked at that feature, but yeah, you can. But yeah, you can't embed these files directly in the document, but you can create clickable links in the notes fields that let you link to other documents and online resources.
Yep, lovely.
Thanks, Wolf.
Cool, thank you, Anne. Ian has just put a comment about autocorrect. He wants spell check, but not autocorrect. This could end up in a culture war if we're not careful. So we'll just go, everyone's right.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll wade into that for a moment. Yeah, autocorrect, I think, is a boon for handheld devices, and it's part of the standard text entry things. On the desktop, not so much. It's spell check and maybe grammar check. And so, we do need better spell checking, grammar checking tools. Obviously, what we do when we finally do have an iPad version, it will have, you can turn autocorrect off if you don't like it, but it'll be participate in the same kinds of text entry systems as the rest of the OS.
Yeah, I must admit, if I were using it, I would be very inclined on my big screen iPad to put the Microsoft 365, a virtual cranked up, well-engineered Windows machine that I can just run from my iPad and use the mouse and keyboard and just run it from there as a pretty quick way of getting it on the iPad, which is unrelated to that, but it just thought me as a good idea.
Sure. You could do screen sharing and use Flying Logic in that way. I haven't tried it myself, but I have done, there's no reason why you couldn't do that. You have to figure out the details for yourself, though. Yeah. It works for you.
So Arne also, is it possible to custom collapse an extensive CRT into an executive summary style that has long arrows? Well, that's a really interesting.
Well, okay. So I guess it depends on what you really need. I mean, you can certainly group things in such a way that the groups themselves become because groups can have titles and notes as well as the entities that they contain. So you can group things judiciously and then collapse them such that they are there's arrows going in and arrows coming out, but the contents are hidden. And so you can start with a very collapsed document, very much like outliners. Like if you hold down Option or Alt on the Windows and click the little collapse thing, it deep collapses or deep expands. So you can deep collapse, a large part of a diagram, show it in a very kind of simple, high level view, and then drill down as you give the presentation into the deeper and deeper parts of the diagram. I've done that quite often.
That's really neat.
So, yeah.
Cool. Okay.
Great.
Sorry. Yeah. Did you want to say something, Arne? It went a bit funny there.
No, I said thanks for the explanation. That's great.
Really good question, actually, because that's one of those things that once you get beyond beginner, that you kind of go, gosh, yeah, really handy if you could do that. Okay, what else have we got here? We have Munwai. She asked me directly, why don't you use it? Actually, I'll tell you the reason I don't use it. It's nothing to do with the software. It's just that what I do nowadays was built on doing a current reality tree the old-fashioned way with stickies on a mirror, a big wide mirror in my spare room where I looked at waterfall software development, way back nearly 20 years ago. And really that became my Rolling Rocks Downhill book. But before that, that's where I did all my heavy lifting. And I've been dining out on that since. So I do use current reality trees. I use clouds much more, but when I do current reality trees, it's normally with like coaching sessions over Zoom. So and we just use Miro, but I do a very half-assed version of them because I'm not trying to solve a big problem. I'm just trying to get clarity on stuff, and Miro does that really well for me. If I was going to do something big, I would definitely dive into Flying Logic, because you saw Graham's example there, trying to do it in Excel where you just draw things. Such hard work. But I normally don't do anything that these days that doesn't fit on a simple PowerPoint size slide, and that's a few arrows. And it's, forgive my language, but it's very half-assed, but it's good enough because it gets clarity on what I need. It's only when you need to take it forward. And if you do take it further, you might be able to create a whole new career for yourself, which is, what I did 20 years ago. And the crazy thing, if anyone's watching that and going, what are all these tools about? I didn't know. I lived in software, and I didn't know what was going wrong with it until I sat down and did a big, big current reality tree where I got all the pieces and I joined them up, and I understood how things worked. And I couldn't see that from inside the system. I could only see it when I tried to draw out the system. So that's why I think flying logic is wonderful. And it's also why I don't use it currently. Let's see what else we got. Danilo, very interesting question. Are you aware of any success stories of organizations using flying logic to create positive results in their performance?
I would say generally, yes. I mean, unfortunately, but specifically, it's hard because most of the companies that are heavy users of flying logic, including consultants as well as larger companies that I'm aware are using it, like Raytheon, and there's some people, Procter and Gamble, are using it, and they use it for very sensitive things. And I, often, since I'm not generally consulting directly for my customers, I don't know what they use it for. So, and case studies are hard to come by. So if anybody who is a flying logic user who would like to offer case studies of how it's helped, I'm definitely in the market for that. Now, in terms of actual individual testimonials, I have hundreds of those, but they tend to be, shorter and more general. And so I know flying logic is working for a lot of people out there, and they wouldn't be using it if it and swearing by it if it wasn't as helping them. But yeah, I definitely need, as part of my larger marketing effort, more case studies. So, if you know of any, please help.
I was just going to add there that, and I won't say the person's name, but I'm sure you'll know who it is, Wolf. And I won't say the company they work for, but they make things that fly, and they live and work in Seattle. And I know they're big users. And they love it. And the particular person was delighted that you were coming on to spread the word about it. So can't say any more, but that's good. What else have we got here? Rodney wants a demo. Would it be a good time to just do? You got a little demo that you could do there?
Yeah, I can do a quick demo. I mean, the best demo I'd say would probably be the introduction to flying logic video on the YouTube channel, which it'll kind of construct a complete kind of toy example. So I'm not even going to take the time to do that here. Let me share my screen okay. So the basic flying logic document is just a canvas sidebar, and you start with this what's called these are inspectors on the side. They can be hidden or shown by using these buttons there. The domain inspector, basically, you choose your domain based on the kind of problem you're trying to solve. In the effects-based planning, you'll probably be familiar with like things from like transition trees, like goals, intermediate effects, preconditions. I often like to start with this. And so, for example, if I have a goal, so I just dragged from the inspector over the canvas and it appeared. Well, if I drag like another thing, like an intermediate effect, it also appears and the goal moves. But did I decide where either is going to be if I wanted to flip the order of these? Well, the answer is no, you can't do that. Flying logic has decided that for you, and it'll become more and more apparent why that's true. But if I say an intermediate effect is needed to achieve this goal, I simply drag to one from the other and it aligns them again. Notice that the arrow I just created, the edge is highlighted, so I can see what changed. The layout is flying logic's province. So let's say I needed to take an action to bring about this intermediate effect. So to do this, I can drag this is called an entity class, goal, intermediate effect. These are classes of entities. So I can drag a precondition onto the canvas, and instead of dragging it to an open end of the canvas, I can drag it to these various kinds of drop zones around the document. And so if I want to create a predecessor of the intermediate effect, I drag it to this left side drop zone and it adds it there. So often creating the entity and creating the edge that connects to those things is a single gesture. So let's say often you need to combine a precondition, which is something that exists and is outside of your control, with an action, something you do. So if I just simply drag this to the arrow here like this, then it will automatically create both the action and what's called a junctor. Now, if you use T.O.C. and you use to like the kind of banana that connects the arrows together and forms an and relationship, meaning they're both necessary and sufficient together. Flying logic doesn't do that. And sometimes people request that. And I'm like, well, I know you're used to doing that on whiteboard and so on, but think for a moment. What if you want to have a lot of other things happening around this? This is actually a more kind of structured way of thinking about it. So for example, if there are two possible things I could do to achieve my goal, it's an action I could do to achieve my goal. I can just drop it there. And this is an OR relationship. Well, how do I know this is an OR relationship? Well, if you know basic ToC, the sufficient cause thinking, that two arrows entering an entity basically are an OR. I can do the action, or I can take this action along with the precondition that achieves the intermittent effect that achieves the goal. But an AND relationship rather than the banana oval that connects the arrows is handled by what I call a junctor, which is AND. Now there's many different kinds of junctors. You can actually, depending on the kind of modeling you're doing, AND or exclusive or proportional, some probabilities. You can do Bayesian reasoning with this. I have examples for that. So it's basically like a spreadsheet turned inside out. In a spreadsheet, you have the grid of cells, and they contain your data and your formulas, and the formulas connect the cells behind the scenes. Well, here you're actually seeing the lines of the formulas connecting the cells, essentially. So there's actual data that flows between these. If I turn on this button here, it shows what I call the confidence spinners, and they start out in kind of 50-50. They're like they're a fuzzy Boolean. They're true or false or somewhere in between. And so I can say that, well, to achieve this goal, I can either take this action. So if I turn this to 100%, you see the goal becomes true. Well, let's say I don't take that action. Well, then the goal is still indeterminate. So I can say, well, I'll take this action. Well, what happened? Well, the intermediate effect didn't become true. Why? Because I'm not sure if the precondition is true. And I've said that it requires the action and the precondition. So I say, oh, okay, so the precondition is true. So the goal becomes true. So flying logic in many scenarios lets you actually test your logic and see whether it makes sense before you present it to anybody else, and help you kind of refine your own thinking using tools like the confidence spinners. Yeah. And so, I'll just add a couple more things here. So for example, this intermediate effect, you normally would be paired up with another precondition that needs to be true and an action. So I put that there. So as you can see, and notice how I dragged to the drop zone to the left of the junctor and just added it right in. You can pretty much drag anything to anything in flying logic. It'll figure out what to do here. I'm going to undo that. I'm going to drag from an edge to an edge. And it added the junctures it needed. And it created this bold area here called the back edge. Flying logic, basically, when it has to violate its rule that everything flows forward as in a direct cyclic graph, it can add a special kind of edge that's more kind of an annotation. It's called the back edge. And so you can kind of model vicious or virtuous cycles or loops and so on, but it doesn't participate in the data flow of the diagram. And that may change at some point in the future. But again, you can drag almost anything to anything. You can't just drag directly backwards to well, in that case, I added a back edge. So you can, in many cases, if it has to violate the rule, it will create a back edge. But there are cases where, for example, if I want to create like a parallel edge, where if you try to drag from E to A again, it says parallel edges are not allowed. So you don't have one edge going from place to place, but it enforces those rules for you, and you learn them very easily after a while. But again, you can connect anything to anything, and it will basically do what you ask it to do, and it'll recalculate the diagram. And it's up to you to decide what this means and whether it makes sense for your kind of problem-solving domain. The animated transitions you see here are the idea is because it can move anything at any time. It lets you, it uses the animated transitions to help you maintain your mental map. And you can make the transitions fast or slow. The preferences basically let you set the display to how long that transitions take, or whether it's adaptive depending on the complexity of the transition. You should experiment with those things, figure out what works well for you. You can also control minor layout things. For example, like whether the diagram is layout left to right or right to left, which makes sense in certain kind of things, or bottom to top or top to bottom. Depending on the kind of diagram you're doing, you may choose to do that. You can also set through certain things like bias, like whether it tries to push things towards the end of the diagram or keep things as close as possible to the start of the diagram. And then, just another thing, you can select things like that and group them. And so here's a group, and here's a group within a group. And you can, for example, just move, ungroup things by just dragging them out. And again, it's doing all the layout itself. I don't know where it's going to put things at each stage. You drag it into a group, and it will basically figure out what it needs to do at each step. And again, sometimes if it looks kind of twisted, it's often because I find my thinking's kind of twisted. I need to figure out, what I'm doing wrong. That probably belongs in that group, or I need to group things differently. And then you can collapse groups, as I mentioned, and you can title collapse groups. So, so you can hide certain levels of detail. Those.
That's really amazing. It's
and then you
hang on words here, Wolf, but,
so
it looks like it's dancing as you're doing it.
That's my video game background, because I got my start many years ago in video games. Like I said, I got started as a kid. When I was 11 years old, I got my start on the Apple II. My first quite a few years were writing video games, and I always felt like video games should always have a very smooth kind of experience. And so I brought that kind of. I always said that even serious software should play like video games, and so that's what you're saying is my philosophy about that.
I like that. It's like apologies to Kevin Costner, but you could call it Dances with Wolf.
Thank you.
Or not. Or not.
Cheesy, but I'll take the compliment.
Okay. There you go. Beautiful, beautiful. Okay. Let's just wander back. Graham, questions, thoughts?
Insight. I've just realised what a clumsy dancer I am. The way I'm not used to dragging things the same way, and I can see that that's so much quicker than double clicking. And
one thing I want to do very soon is start weekly webinars where I basically, open up a number of slots for people to just come in and work with me for an hour or so on this kind of thing, so they can really kind of get Flame Logic and then publish the webinars for other people to watch as well. So that's coming very soon as well.
Okay, look forward to that. And I'd heard about the incremental layout button, or heard that the effect is you could freeze things, but hadn't really found it.
I can give a quick demo of that if you like, but it's the let's do it really quickly, since that's something that comes up a fair amount. So let me uncollapse everything here in this current diagram. So there's the current diagram. I'm going to zoom out just a bit. I'm using the scroll wheel to zoom out here. There's also the zoom slider down here. Again, there's a lot of shortcuts for here. You can actually, if the diagram is very large, or at least taking up a large portion of the screen, you have a navigation thing here where you can actually see your diagram and zoom around on it like that. And again, scroll wheel, zoom in and out. All the Flame Logic output PDF for printing is print quality. So, but for example, if I make a change, like for example, I'm going to drag from this entity to that juncture there. So let me try to find the one that actually makes a fairly large layout change, because it can be hard to do with a smaller diagram. Okay, so that was a fairly large layout change. Okay, so I'm going to undo that. So you see when I connect F to B here, you see those number of things move. These two groups change place and so on. Now the incremental layout button is here on the toolbar. You turn that on. I'm going to connect F to B again, and you see it made a much smaller change to do that. It didn't swap the places of these two groups or anything like that. It created an incremental change. And for now, that'd be fine. Now, if I turn incremental F immediately, it will put things back the way it had it. But you notice that the diagram is smaller now than it was before.
Yes.
So, so if I connect F to B, incremental layout is currently on. Now that time it made a different change. Now again, you can't predict things when incremental layout is on. As you make changes, it will try to make the minimal changes. Incremental layout is currently on. So if I try to make these kind of more radical changes, it'll keep things pretty stable for quite a while. And then you'll start to notice like, oh, it made like an arrow go backwards or something like that. And at that point, you turn incremental layout off, let it adjust everything on its own, and then things snap back to kind of be their more kind of parsimonious form.
And that's the moment you zoom out, get the big picture again. And
yeah, exactly.
Nice.
So,
beautiful.
yeah.
Actually. Very elegant. I hope you feel proud of yourself when you're demonstrating that. That's really good.
I kind of do actually. And sometimes I go, wow, I wrote that, but obviously, my big goal right now is, again, get the world to know about this, because, like I say, I use it all the time. I guess this is the kind of thing that if it didn't exist, I'd have to invent it, and it didn't. So I did. So, and I'm glad it exists. And I want the whole world to use it and see it and love it as much as you guys do. So thank you.
Lovely. Very nice job. Hey, Jack, would you be up for just a couple of questions? Yeah? Why not? Why not? Okay, you'll have to come off mute, though.
That would help.
Excellent. Very good. So, I know there was a comment earlier about how you've used it a lot. I'm just wondering if you'd mind sharing what you do.
I mean, I've primarily used it with essentially a half backside version of prerequisite trees. So you were describing your half-arsed versions of.
Yes, indeed. Yes.
Yeah, and the nice thing with any tool that you use, whether it's sticky notes or a pen on a whiteboard or Miro or Flying Logic or anything else, you can be as rigorous or rigorous as you want.
Yep. Yep.
But so what I've done is working with teams, and while a future version that is fully collaborative would be sort of a wish, it's easy enough to walk a team through, share their screen and walk a team through the conversation of what's our goal. In order to achieve that goal, what must I have? In order to achieve that sub goal, what must I have? And walk them through the process of building it. And whether, that's a CRT or a prerequisite tree sort of, it's actually something called a product flow diagram, which comes out of the Prince 2 playbook, but I've twisted it and bastardized it. I think it's something that Tony Rizzo taught a friend of mine, and then we've been using it together. So, we all learn these things together.
That's really cool. It'd be nice to have a demo of that sometime on here if you were ever willing.
I wonder if I could. I mean, So maybe we could do how the process works. Obviously, I can't share.
But what I really like,
they get pretty big. So the thing that that Wolf was describing around the incremental layouts, I totally get that some people get freaked out by it, but they get pretty big. So using that grouping and collapsing things so that they're not, that's not the center of attention right now, is a very useful way to help the teams focus. And then you can kind of zoom way out, and you can't read anything, but you say, okay, but if you look at the groups, kind of like what the question that Arnie was asking earlier of, let's zoom way out and maybe grouping things and collapsing those groups. Say, okay, in order to get to goal, we need these 5 large groups of things. And by the way, notice that there's links between the groups. So there's deliverables in the software group that are related to deliverables in the hardware group. And you may not see them if you collapse things, but maybe that's not relevant, but you need to see the connections. And it looks like my internet connection is unstable. So sorry about that. With COVID times, we've been doing this in Zoom workshops and several hours of people. And the nice thing is that people contribute and they see where they see. The one thing that we miss is with sticky notes on walls in a physical workshop is that everybody has their sticky notes and puts it up on the wall, and they can see, that's my handwriting. And that's, I used purple on a pink sticky note and you used yellow, right? So, so we missed that a little bit with this kind of format. I've tried using, not Miro, the other one.
Mural?
There's one called
Mural. Yeah.
Mural, which is another sticky note virtual tool. And when I used it, it kept crashing on me. So like, okay, forget that.
Yeah.
But
when you
the conversation is
you're sharing a screen,
somebody's sharing a screen and they type really fast. And so, as Wolf was saying, you very quickly learn all the shortcuts. So there's a whole bunch. I'm a keyboard guy, probably an old software guy too, and like all the keyboard shortcuts I use those all the time.
Yep.
Control E, Control G, Control Shift E. Yeah, and I'm a fast typer, which helps. If you're not a fast typer, you need somebody else to do that, and so you can have somebody facilitating and somebody typing. But only one person can be typing at a time.
Yeah.
Okay. Flying Logic has features like quick capture, which I have a video about on the YouTube channel that lets you brainstorm quickly. So people are calling out stuff, you can type, create entity without connecting them, without having to drag anything.
It's really neat.
Yeah. So and all those, so that some of the additional capabilities around some of the collaborative software would be nice, but I mean, in the way that I've been using it, and some of my colleagues have been using it, it's been okay. It works just fine.
Yeah, and it's purpose built for what you're trying to do.
Yes.
Like I said, I use Miro with coaching stuff,
Yes.
and that's quite good if you want to. If you just one to one, you can just sit there and just move things around. Just suddenly you're just teasing out words and changing words and moving the order around, and this little sort of scruffy kind of diagram comes up. And I was doing this with Ian Larson, who was on from WiseTech. I'm not sure, maybe 6-8 weeks ago now. And we were doing it, and I said, look, you've got to keep in mind here that this here will be a really half-ass sort of like version of a CRT. And he got to the end of it, and he goes, and very Ian kind of stuff, that really is half-assed, isn't it? But it helps. And that's what you're trying to do. If you're trying to get something and maybe tidy it up and present it to someone, or if you've got a lot bigger, more than can fit on like a little A4, getting something, I can just see the power of what you've got there, moving it around and building this. But it's like by analogy, almost like when you write fiction, you create a world. And you're creating this world, and you're like living inside it. And I imagine Wolf, speaking as an ex-coder, ex-programmer, you actually feel like you're living inside the diagrams, and you can almost move inside them the same way you do when you're inside code. Yeah. So,
definitely, and actually, I'm still a very active coder. I've always felt like for me, software is a form of kind of creative expression. So I code for fun, but it's interesting you mentioned being looking at it as a creative endeavor. There are people who actually use Flying Logic to do plot design and script design for fiction. So many years ago, long before Flying Logic, when I was still doing video games, I used Microsoft Project because it basically does a direct acyclic graph to design an adventure game, where you had to do A to do B to do C to do D. I could have done it much more effectively with Flying Logic, but the idea of using a visual directed acyclic graph to do story design even is something that definitely people told me that they use Flying Logic as writers for that.
Really, I remember Ali Goldratt many years ago said that he wrote his books with transition trees. And I tried that, and it just didn't work for me. I don't think my mind was quite as high-powered or wired in the same way as his. But I can see that, and a lot of the software that we have these days is just breaking. Like I mentioned, Scrivener, it breaks stuff down so you can get the big picture as well as the local detail. And I can see how you could do that really well in diagram form. And I can particularly see how you could do it with a choose your own adventure.
Exactly. That was the idea back then. And like I said, I didn't have Flying Logic, but I do know people are using Flying Logic for that kind of thing right now.
Oh, that sounds really interesting. Sorry, I'm just geeking out on this. This is really cool. Thank you. Yeah. Right. I am going to suggest that we get you back on some other time. So we can put you in rant mode if you like, and talk about logic and thinking and being disagreeable and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yep. And I should frame
I'll give
go
ahead.
Your podcast. I just started listening to it, and it's and I love it how you frame it. How one of the big 5 personality traits. It's not that you're disagreeable. It's just that you're not high on
trait agreeability is what it's called.
Agreeability.
And
tell us a little bit about that.
The big 5 or OCEAN ocean traits are, one of them is agreeability. I test very low on agreeability, which doesn't mean I'm a jerk. It basically means I believe in telling the truth, even at the expense of your feelings. So, because that's how I show I care, is I tell the truth. So, and for me, truth is a very high value, and, Flying Logic and using, reason without denying emotion and other kind of fuzzier things, they still exist and they're still important for their own purposes, is very important to me. So my podcast, Beware of Wolf, is about what I call higher and whole brain thinking. And that includes critical thinking as well as kind of integrating, the left and right halves of our brain and things like that. So, the podcast isn't about Flying Logic per se, but it is about why people should think better. And I've kind of aimed it at a younger audience. It's not highly academic. It's more aimed at kind of a very general audience.
You mean 40-year-olds?
And I hope, sure, yeah, absolutely. Well, I hope by this time in life, I'm 56. I hope by this time I have something worth teaching. But yeah, so but yeah, I'm hoping to explore a lot of different areas that will, touch on things that Flying Logic touches on, but ultimately is going to stand on its own and be kind of evergreen. I'm not looking to like delve into the political issues of the day. Yep. There's plenty of people to do that. I want to do material that will be valuable 5, 10, 15 years from now.
Lovely. That's cool. Okay. So maybe we get you back on and maybe we can sort of geek out on some thinking, critical thinking. Love that. Yeah, and we'll do it in a nice, agreeable way. But I do like how you framed agreeableness there, and it's with quite a lot of thought. But quite a lot of thought behind it, not just quite a lot. So, what I wondered if we might do now is just basically, if everyone would mind, I know. Actually, hang on, let me see if I can do this. If everyone would just don't worry about the video. If you can, just turn your no, this is going to sound contrived. We'll pop the video on. We'll go into gallery view, and I know a few people have had to leave here. And if you don't mind, just do a thumbs up and as a thank you, because I think that was really awesome. Well, thank you very much. Really enlightening. And just so you all know, thank you, Doug. Just so you know, next week we're going to have one of my TOC heroes. There are quite a lot of them out there. Richard Zoltner. So Richard's going to come on, and I don't know how to describe a session, but it would basically be it's how to find out what you're good at, and it's not a TO session, but a TOC session, but it is. So Richard's going to come on. We have Vicky Mabin, who's going to come on in a wee while, talk about the gold tree. We have Linda Mandan, who's going to come in and give a nice user-friendly version, her interpretation, and how she's used the choice. Again, another kind of one of Ellie's sort of heavier thinking books. She just got a nice summarized version of it, which I think you'll all really enjoy. And so I've got a whole bunch of stuff lined up to come on. If any of you guys want to share anything, let me know, because at the moment I'm not running out of content. And not running out of interesting people to talk to. But there's a lot of really interesting stories, I think, that deserve to be on YouTube so other people can know about them. And this is how we make the world wiser. There you go. Right. How about we do the 3, 2, 1, goodbye. And I'm actually going to hit the button this time.